What if I told you there's a version of Linux designed specifically for gamers by a guy who literally works on Proton? Join me in a moment to see exactly what I'm talking about. Hello and welcome back to Nellie's Nerd Cave. Today we're here for the second video in my quest to find an operating system I'm going to use on a gaming PC in my living room, build to come soon. This video I'm going to be talking about Nobara Linux, one of the most gamer-focused Linux distros out there, and especially the Steam-focused setup that's making Windows gamers seriously consider switching. And unlike a lot of Linux projects that expect you to be this wonderful wizard in the terminal and get really confused with commands, Nobara is built to make gaming stupidly easy. So what exactly is Nobara? Nobara is a modified version of Fedora Linux, created by Thomas Kreider, and if that name sounds familiar, then it should do. It's the same developer behind GE-Proton, one of the most important Proton compatibility tools in Linux gaming today. So right away you know that this particular distro was built by somebody who actually understands what PC gamers need and want. So why is this actually needed and why does it exist? Well, here's the thing. Gaming on Linux used to be an absolute nightmare. You'd install Linux, then you'd spend 6 hours hunting drivers, another 3 hours fixing those drivers, installing codecs, making sure those codecs function, and somehow audio still wouldn't work. Nobara basically exists to eliminate all that nonsense. It comes pre-configured with gaming fixers, media codecs, proprietary drivers, OBS tweaks, which is really important for gamers, and performance optimisations right out of the box. So instead of spending your weekend configuring Linux, you can actually play games. What an absolute concept that is. And I can tell you, it was pretty simple. So for the installation, like my previous video, you're going to need a USB stick with enough space for the ISO. You go to the Nobara website, which is in the link below, and scroll until you find Steam HTPC. There is one for handheld, but I'm sticking to the full PC version, and it takes you to another list. From here, you select Steam HTPC version, and this will support AMD. If you want NVIDIA, you have to scroll a little bit further and hit download on the NVIDIA version. You get Rufus, you then install your memory stick, you burn the ISO to the drive. I'm using Ventoy. This gets rid of the whole Rufus side of things. I just stick it on the stick and off you go. Once complete, you take the memory stick, you put it into said computer, switch it on and wait. You should then be presented with this screen and the Steam logo. Then you should see the Nobara logo and install screen. Just click next, check your time zone, check your keyboard layout, then you are presented with the question of what drive do you want to use. I selected the correct drive, then erase disk and click next. Then install now. You then wait quite a while. While waiting, you can also play a little game on screen, which is quite a nice little touch. Once the system is installed, you tick the Restart Now box and done. Don't forget to remove the USB stick and let it boot. The first boot takes around about 3 to 5 minutes and then get to this selection screen. Select your language, then wait for it to update. This may take a while again. Once complete, you get to the Steam login page, log in as normal, then it's just like a Steam Deck and your Steam in big picture mode, and you are absolutely good to go. You can go into the desktop mode, and they have provided a full install screen for optional extras, driver updates, which keeps things really simple. The one thing that everybody needs to remember with Nobara Linux is that if you shut down the machine in desktop mode, you will boot up in desktop mode. If you shut down the machine in big picture mode, it will open in big picture mode. It's just something that you kind of need to remember. Now this is where things get really interesting. Nobara includes a dedicated Steam-focused experience that's clearly inspired by the Steam OS, and depending on your setup you can configure it to boot directly into Steam's big picture or gaming mode. So your gaming PC basically turns into a console. You hit the power button and boom, straight into the game library. No desktop clutter, no Windows notifications asking you if you want to finish setting up OneDrive. No random pop-ups, just games and you enjoying your games. Now, why is Steam on Linux such a big deal? If you haven't been paying attention, Steam on Linux has become way better than most people realise. A huge reason for this is Proton. Proton is Valve's compatibility layer that lets Windows games run on Linux. And honestly, it's kind of like magic. Thousands of Windows games now run on Linux with little to no tweaking. And with the developer of this creating GE-Proton, this sometimes runs a little bit better. And you're going to see that in some of the benchmarks later on, especially for Counter-Strike 2. Now, because Nobara is maintained by someone deeply connected to the Proton ecosystem, it's constantly tuned for game compatibility, which is a really nice touch. Now, one of Nobara's biggest selling points is optimization. It includes things like pre-configured GPU drivers, patched kernels, low latency tweaks, and gaming-focused improvements. And unlike some Linux distros that prioritise absolute stability over everything else, Nobara leads toward gaming performance and usability, which honestly really makes sense. If gamers wanted maximum stability, we'd all still be using Windows XP. Windows XP. Never mind. So who is this really for? Well, Nobara Linux is really for, well, if you own a gaming PC and you're Linux curious, for example. This might be one of the easiest entry points for you. If you're building a living room gaming setup, like I am, Nobara's Steam-focused experience is absolutely wonderful. You can see it on the screen behind me. It looks exactly like the Steam OS. And if you're running handheld PCs like the ROG Ally or the Legion Go, a lot of people are kind of experimenting with Linux gaming distros like Nobara to get a more console-like experience on the handheld device. Especially because Windows on handheld still feels kind of weird sometimes. You know, I don't think it's really designed for that type of device. Now, one thing people really love about Nobara is you install it and most stuff just works. That sounds absolutely normal to Windows users, but in Linux gaming this is practically sorcery. No codec installs, no GPU panic attacks, no mysterious dependency errors written in ancient wizard language, and Nobara handles a huge amount of the setup automatically, and that's honestly one of the biggest reasons it's gaining popularity. And now for some benchmarks. This is where Nobara has some real good advantages. In my previous video, we looked at Counter-Strike 2 and noticed that the FPS was capped at 60. And this was due to the method that Bazite used to display this game using full screen windowed mode. Once you're in that, you are capped according to Counter-Strike 2's notes. In Nobara, it uses GE-Proton, which is a slight variation of the normal Proton flavour. GE-Proton seems to run this in full screen mode like a PC, and therefore we get a much higher FPS than in Bazite, literally 6 times more, at 350 frames per second. A much smoother gameplay experience and makes the game much nicer to actually run and utilise. Now moving on to Shadow of the Tomb Raider, we see similar frames with frames hitting an average of 122 FPS, making this about the same as the previous install. Doom the Dark Ages is another game I like, and I ran the inbuilt benchmark and it hit the average of 135 FPS. Again, nice and smooth gameplay. And the settings I used for all of these games were the defaults that Steam recommended to use for these particular games. Just makes setup so much simpler and so easy if you use what Steam recommends, especially as seen as it kind of thinks it's a Steam Deck with a bit more oomph. So, what's the catch? Let's talk about the downsides, because there are some. First off, Linux gaming still isn't perfect. Certain anti-cheat systems still block Linux entirely, so games like Valorant are basically a no-go, and some multiplayer games can still be hit or miss. Second, you are using Linux, and that means sometimes troubleshooting weird issues. Now, Nobara makes this way easier than traditional Linux distros, but it's not completely foolproof. I'm a fool and I can contest to that. And if you rely heavily on Adobe apps, certain launchers, or niche Windows software, you may still need dual booting systems. But honestly, I think while on my quest for a Linux-based gaming solution, Nobara represents something much bigger. For years, PC gaming was basically tied to Windows. If you wanted compatibility, you had no choice. But now, Valve pushed Proton. The Steam Deck exploded, and projects like Nobara are making Linux gaming actually approachable. And that's huge. Competition is good, and the fact that Windows finally has real pressure in gaming that could benefit everybody is amazing. So, should you try Nobara on your own systems? If you're curious about Linux gaming, if you love Steam, if you want a console-like PC experience, or if you're just tired of Windows doing Windows things, then yes, Nobara might be one of the best Linux distros for gamers right now, especially if your goal is basically Steam OS, but for gaming PCs. And honestly, that's a pretty compelling idea, especially as seen as Steam now allows you to install it on a general computer. And that's it for today's video. Have you tried Nobara? Would you switch your gaming PC to Linux? Because I'm sure going to have a go. Or are you staying loyal to Windows forever? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into gaming tech, Linux and nerdy PC stuff, hit like, subscribe and ring the bell. And I'll see you next week in Nellie's Nerd Cave. See ya.